Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture. And before I introduce my guest, I do want to remind everybody that links are up above for their Kickstarter or his Kickstarter that he is running, as well as there is a link for Buy Me a Coffee. And buying me a coffee is not buying me a Starbucks coffee. It is a website, much like Patreon, that helps us support this show and everything else that I'm doing. So if you feel inclined, back both things. Donate goes a long way. You got to support indie content creators. So without further ado, I have one of the members of the team behind Superbuds, Tim Radecki, which is currently funding on Kickstarter. And I think you guys already funded a little bit over your position. And so welcome to the show.
Hey, Andrew, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it. This is awesome. Thanks for having us on.
You know, I am very excited because obviously your comic is interesting. It's something a little bit different, and
Definitely.
it's dealing with something that's 420 oriented, if you will. And I think it's pretty obvious by the title, but I have to ask it anyway. What is the basic premise of this comic?
Yeah. So our
It might be
comic,
obvious, though. It might be obvious.
to some, definitely. So the comic's called Superbud, and that's what it's about. So it's an action comedy about what would happen if marijuana gave you superpowers. That's sort of the elevator pitch. So in our comic, there's a laboratory that is working on what they're chemically enhanced marijuana. So with medical marijuana out there, this company is trying to take advantage of that. So they're working on a product that's going to be chemically enhanced. And they developed this strain that actually gives people superpowers. The doctor who invents it doesn't want it falling in the wrong hands. So she's trying to get it out of her nefarious pharmaceutical company's hands. And it ends up in the hands of a drug dealer who spreads it through this small town, not knowing what it does. So all these people in this town that smoke it start getting superpowers. So it kind of becomes a mystery and a little bit of a thriller after that, as the people that start getting superpowers start to figure out what's going on and trying to escape this nefarious pharmaceutical company that's hot on their tails. And then simultaneously, it's also a little bit of like a superhero origin story. So while most people that get superpowers kind of think of how it benefits their immediate world, so you know, some people that are into crime they're better at being criminals. Some other people that are into like the political sphere use that to their advantage. But our main character is like your lovable, geeky stoner. He spends his time smoking marijuana and reading comics and watching cartoons and all of that kind of stuff. So he wants to be like the characters that he idolizes. So when he gets superpowers, instantly he thinks, I'm going to be a superhero. While the rest of the people in the real world tell him that's not a great idea. So it's both of those kind of things at the same time, a thriller and a hero origin story.
So we're going to get into a bunch of that and talk about it, but I am curious where the inspiration came from, because obviously medical marijuana is hitting a lot more states now. It's obviously turning a corner. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on with the stock market. Obviously, I was just speaking to somebody from Canada. We weren't speaking about this, I want to make that clear, but Shopify has a deal with, you know, medical marijuana and everything that's going on. And that deal has been in place, I think, for 2 years now. And so obviously it has been massively destigmatized. But
Definitely.
Where did this idea come from? Because it is different.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
So we actually came up with this idea. My writing partner and I, Mike Dean and I, came up with the idea originally back in 2012. So while it was on its way to being destigmatized in certain places, you know, on the West Coast had already had like the medical marijuana thing. It certainly wasn't to the point where it is now. I think between total legalization and legalized medically, we're at a majority of states in the United States right now. And obviously, like our friends up north in Canada have legalized already. So just in that short amount of time, it's really blown up. So fortuitous for us in this venture that we're in right now with this comic. But we didn't know that at the time. We were hoping that was where it was going. So our background is we were film students. We met in film school. So we started writing together. We were both kind of like serious writer-directors, but we started hanging out and working together on sketch comedy. That was our background. Both just having fun, like on the side, writing sketch comedy with we had a sketch group with friends, and Mike Dean and I were the guys that were the ones that wanted to write, while everybody loved hanging out and shooting things and acting. Writing wasn't necessarily what they were interested in. That was where we leaned in a little bit more. So that was our background. That's how we started writing together. And then out of school, we just decided to make like a partnership in writing. A teacher of ours had suggested writing for television versus film, just because they only make X amount of films per year, but there's a lot more TV content. And that was before all this streaming. So in a way, it's even grown exponentially since then. So we got into writing for television, and we had written a lot of spec scripts and original pilots. Never sold anything. We did produce a 6-episode web series called Wrapped. That was about our experiences working in the film industry as PAs, production assistants, like the worst job you can have in the film industry. So we had a web series about that. But we were both lifelong comic fans. It was something we bonded over when we first started hanging out. Back then in like 2004, comics were not as widely popular as they are now, despite movies like Spider-Man and X-Men and Batman being really popular. Comics themselves were still looked down upon, so it was something we bonded over. We always like shared comics. Like, did you read this? This is my favorite. That was kind of like one of the things that we bonded over. So we knew we wanted to write comics, but we literally knew nothing about it. Having gone to film school, we had read a lot of books about writing for TV and film. We knew that we had friends in the industry, so we kind of knew that background, but we really had nowhere to start. And we just had gone to New York Comic Con probably in 2010. And sat in on a panel and just heard from industry experts. And it was like, oh, it might be attainable for us. And at the same time, there was sort of like that second wave of Image Comics riding off the success of Robert Kirkman's Walking Dead. Invincible had come out, and there was just a lot of like interesting comics that were being made that weren't necessarily just like your prototypical superhero comic. And that's where we kind of felt like, oh, there might be an area for us to get into comics. So we didn't want to just jump in. We kind of waited till we had the right idea, and Superboy was that idea that like we thought about as a TV show, we thought about as a film, and it really just had to be a comic. We could imagine like the hijinks of it, like the superhero side of it, that kind of like nerdy comic booky kind of humor to it. It just seemed like it fit best as a comic. So we just kind of jumped in feet first without really knowing much about the industry or how to make a comic. We had just come off of producing our own web series, so we just said, let's figure it out as we go. So it was a lengthy process, but that's how we got started. And the idea specifically, our dean pitched it to me. We always pitch each other. We'll call each other up, or if we're having a writing meeting, and he pitched it. And it was really, if you've read the first issue, it's a scene in the first issue was his pitch was just, this dealer is going to sell to this guy that's coming in, the main character. We didn't have a name for him at the time, but kind of like your protagonist. And as he's leaving, there's these other guys that are coming in that are gang members. And it's just kind of showing like how like that one dealer that has this wide array of people that he deals to, and just like the varying different kind of people. That was something we were interested in highlighting. Like in this small town, how many people smoke pot? And it might be people that you expect that are maybe like your token stoners. And there's going to be people that are businessmen that are going to surprise you, or like the elderly. In our comic, we have an older patient who needs it for healthcare reasons, and their nurse gets it for them. So we explore that. And then something interesting that we kind of stumbled on as we were writing it was, at the time, we really didn't know where it was medical marijuana was going to go, but just kind of worst case scenario was thinking like, what happens when big business gets their hands on this? At the time, in those few states that had it, it was pretty well controlled, but we were kind of anticipating what we're already seeing now is the commercialization and big business getting their hands on it, and the dangers that could bring. And looking at the tobacco industry and all the additives they've added to tobacco and things like that cause major health concerns. So that was in the back of our head as we kind of came up with this idea of this.
So obviously there's a lot to unpack, and I want to get into some of this. And obviously we sort of get a very cool scenario going on, because the idea of an origin superhero story is not the new part of this. It's the introduction of weed as being the thing that grants people power. I think is the new idea, and the fact that, somebody gives it gets into the hands of a dealer, and then it's distributed, and how it affects the entire town. And we're in a cool situation with this character, Danny, who is a college dropout. He's 20. He's sort of at a cross point in his life where he's like, nothing's really going on in his life. He's not very successful. He's somewhat lazy. He's unmotivated, but he's really bored in his life. And then,
absolutely,
sort of takes a hit, and then this wide range of opportunity opens up for him but along with a variety of other, I guess, clauses, such as, when you're a superhero, there's responsibility, it's understanding your powers, it's also understanding that, if I'm a superhero and I'm stopping a bad guy, there might be another bad guy who's going to come after me later on and all that stuff. So what was this like really setting this up? Because it's an interesting character when somebody gets powers and then they say, I want to be a hero, and they get the opportunity to do something with their life, but maybe they're not analyzing the complete consequences of that.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit it on the head there. I think Danny is idyllic with how he looks at it. He wants to be this hero, and it's the spark that gives him the motivation to kind of get out of his rut. We start the story when he's kind of at his lowest point, like you mentioned. He's dropped out of school. He doesn't have a job yet, and his girlfriend just breaks up with him. That's sort of the start of it. But he's looking for that motivation, and this is his motivation for him. But you're right, he hasn't thought it through yet. He doesn't know the consequences, and everybody's telling him in the real world this doesn't work. So he's gonna jump into it feet first, but there's gonna be a lot of obstacles that he's not prepared for. Peter Parker learns early on that with great with great power comes great responsibility. Danny has not learned that yet. So he's got a lot to learn on the way, which causes a lot of the drama in the comic, which is exciting to kind of play off of and give him those opportunities to see if he can succeed or fail.
And then it goes even further into this a little bit, where it's also the idea that, he's learning what his powers are at the same time. And it's like nobody, because I'm assuming this world, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's nothing like that has been in this world. In a Marvel book, for lack of a better word, when Peter Parker gets his powers, Captain America's been around for a little bit, Iron Man's been around. And so while, Peter Parker doesn't seek guidance per se, it still is more norm. This is a brand new thing in this world as well. So there's no mentorship going on
Yeah,
either.
definitely. Yeah, absolutely. So he's the first, and even the other characters that are getting superpowers, they're thinking about how does it benefit their lives individually. They're not thinking about it in a super heroic fashion that he is. That's just because he idolizes these comic book characters, and that's where his mindset goes, where every other adult tells him that's a crazy idea, until in this third issue that we've just come out with, a younger character gets superpowers. And that's kind of where their mindset goes too. So it shows that Danny's really equivalent to this 9-year-old that he's friends with.
And then obviously there's some other stuff going on where this dealer is distributing to a variety of people. And obviously this is a particular batch. And I don't know if there's more batches coming. There might be, there might not be. I'm not exactly sure, but it's this idea that, everybody has a different position with it. And you stated there's a bunch of different characters. And also this stuff affects people differently as well. And so what was that like, setting that parameter? Because it's not, you take this thing and then you fly. Everybody has a different reaction to it, which is also very fascinating, because obviously I think marijuana affects people much like alcohol affects people very differently. And so what was that like? Because now we're diving into some biochemistry stuff.
Yeah, and we're certainly not experts in that, but being fans of comics, that was the most fun for us. Really, this project was like one of the most fun projects we've ever worked on. We were so excited to write it, and it came so quickly for us. Originally, I think we wrote the first 5 issues and an outline for. Originally, we thought 30 issues, which is totally crazy to think about now. But the ideas just came so quickly and so easily to us because we just had all this resources to pull from all the comics and cartoons that we watched growing up, and even the recent comic book movies. There's so much that inspired us that we take reference to. We kind of do an homage to things here and there. We pull from some things we seem to lean on, and we go do a 180 just for fun. So there's a lot that inspired us there. But yeah, you're right. And creating this ensemble cast, it really is an ensemble. It's not just about Danny, even though he is the protagonist and the main character. We're slowly weaving in all these other characters, and all their stories are coming to fruition in these first 5 issues. But creating their powers and kind of coming up with all of that was a ton of fun, and how it affects everybody, both in their own personality and the quantity that they smoke or inhale has an effect on the kind of power that they have, and the severity of their power. So while Danny flies and is more of like airy, one of the characters is a big giant monster, and it has to do with the amount that they smoke. One of the characters who has like prolonged exposure to this, who's been smoking it the most often, has a negative reaction to it because of that. So we get to play with it a lot of different ways. And it's also a little bit of their personality and the quantity that they have.
And then obviously there's some other stuff going on because, well, you know, it's sort of like My Hero Academia. I don't know if you know My Hero,
Yeah.
but most people have a quirk, and people go one way, some people go the other, and then some people just use their quirk at their job. And some people are heroes and some people are villains, and they go that route. And so obviously we sort of get that where there's these gangsters who pick up some of this stuff, and well, obviously they're going to be utilizing it to their advantage to commit more crimes and commit bigger crimes. And well, that puts them at odds with Danny and possibly a few other people in the town who might have inhaled this and smoked it. And so what was that like, having that being done and diving into that psychology and even what's going on with them?
Yeah.
You don't expect sort of a gangster necessarily to, you know, be inhaling this.
They were two of the other characters that we came up with like right off the bat, right in that first initial pitch. That was kind of the idea, was to set up these hero and villain kind of personas very early on. That was back when we originally came up with the idea, and it's been fun developing it. And really, they're second protagonists. They're not even necessarily villains. We're telling their story as it goes, and it's their rise to power from like low-level drug dealer hitmen working for a larger gangster to getting to a point where they're running the show and taking over the operation. So we're building their story as protagonists as well. So a lot of fun there, developing them and developing their powers that are based on how they smoke and their own personas. So the one guy is a little bit hot-headed, and he develops this heat power. So it starts with him being able to heat things up, and it's going to grow to him being able to fully inflame things. The other character is known as Chill. He's like a relaxing kind of guy. He likes to smoke his blunts and hang out and drink his 40 and relax, and he's real chill and laid back. And he's got like this power where he can freeze things and eventually will create ice and be able to like almost like Iceman or Frozone or something like that, like really make full on ice. So as the story goes on, their powers are going to continue to progress and increase in strength, and as they're learning how to utilize them properly, because just like Danny, our protagonist, they're learning on the go as well.
And then obviously there's two more characters. There's the elderly man, who is sort of, you know, taking this for one reason, and he might not necessarily be too happy that he now has powers because, well, sometimes people don't even want this stuff. Yeah. I don't know if you've explored that side of this yet, but obviously that is something that where, you know, if you're elderly and you just want this because it's helping you on a physical level, all of a sudden, and now you have superpowers or you have super meta-human abilities, could be a pain in the ass. So I mean, and then there's also the fact that somebody's turned into a gigantic green monster.
Yeah.
As well, and that's also something that's big because it's the idea that, you know, you morph into something, and you know now you can't go back. And it becomes a whole bigger issue. So what is that like to play with those two characters, because they definitely deal with different tropes?
Yeah, definitely. This project's so fun because there's so many characters going on and a lot to really explore. Walter is our elderly man. So we tease him in issue 1. He's a bit of a curmudgeon, and his personal nurse, his stay-at-home nurse, Anton, ends up getting him the marijuana. We don't really get into the full story of what's going on there, but it must not be legal whatever state they're in. But it's coming down the line. There is a politician, and he's working with this pharmaceutical company that we learned that they're working to get to this legalization of medical marijuana. So this guy gets it from his dealer that he knows, this guy in town, and that's how he ends up getting this super bud to this elderly person, obviously not knowing that it's going to give Walter these superpowers. So we explore that in issue 3. At the end of issue 2, he receives the weed, the super bud. And then we get to explore that in issue 3, which is the newest issue on the Kickstarter. All 3 issues are going to be available through the Kickstarter. So that's something we explore there is Walter's powers that he doesn't know about, doesn't expect. And you're right, maybe doesn't want. He's at an aging part of his life. He's really ill. sort of at the end of his life, and knows it, and how that might affect his decisions going forward with new abilities. That'll be something we're going to explore. And then the other side, the lighthearted part of issue 3, is Mikey. Mikey is Rob's younger brother. Rob is Danny's best friend. He's sort of the sidekick that goes along with the story. We introduce him in issue 1. At the end of issue 2, Rob has been making brownies that he's saving, and his brother comes home and eats a whole tray of these weed brownies, not knowing that they're weed brownies. So as a result, he becomes this giant monster. So the very last thing on the last page of issue 2 is his shadow kind of looming over Rob, and Rob, realizing that he's in trouble. So we explore that in issue 3. It's where a lot of the humor from issue 3 comes from. I didn't really talk about that, but it's despite as serious as we take the storytelling, it is a comedy overall. There's a lot of funny parts in it. So a lot of the humor in issue 3 comes out of this 9-year-old getting superpowers and turning into a giant monster. And he realizes he can control his monster. So it's not quite like the Hulk with Bruce Banner, like having to get angry. He can control it through bodily functions. So every time he farts or burps, he can change. He can morph from monster to back to his normal little kid self. So there's a lot of fun that comes from that.
And so obviously there's a lot of stuff going on, and obviously we're dealing with a superhero who's sort of coming into his own, understanding his powers. We understand criminals understand their powers, and obviously a lot of choices are being made, and then obviously there's also consequences for some of this stuff and what it's doing. And then obviously there's going to be some other stuff where the pharmaceutical company, and I'm sure the government's going to get involved somehow, and it's going to be like, hey, tracking down who's taking this, what's taking this. I'm sure that other people have gotten this as well. And so obviously there's a lot of stuff going on with this, both on a, storytelling and serious side, but at the same time, it's kind of a funny premise altogether. And not to take away from the serious side of this, but it is definitely, as you said, humorous. And I don't think anybody is taking this, the same way you would view the Justice League per se. I think it's pretty clear that this is meant to be a comedy. It's meant to be almost satire to some degree. It's meant to be, parody of things. And so obviously all these people are sort of going to be crossing paths with each other and what's going on. And we're going to see how this entire town is affected by it, because I have a feeling this town is sort of, just a run-of-the-mill sort of Central America type town that nothing happens in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for saying that too. I appreciate that. But yeah, it is like that, very much like this everyday, every part of America kind of represented. We call it Emerald Oaks. It was just like a generic name we came up with that had like a little green reference to it. But it's supposed to stand in for anywhere in the United States. This kind of small town, small city. It's got a little bit of urban life, a little bit of suburban life, but definitely the small town kind of vibe to it. And no one really seems to have ever experienced anything like this before. And as it progresses, it's going to be fun to play with how that affects the town as well, and the average person in the town. But you're right, there is a little bit of this parody to it. Every one of our covers has like a reference to a classic superhero. That was an idea of our artist, Tim Radecki, who's awesome. Ton of fun to work with. He does really great stuff. We've been fortunate enough to work with him going way back to like 2013, I think was when we first started working together with Tim, and it really brought the comic to life. But that was his idea. So we did that with the first issue 1. There's an Amazing Fantasy, the classic Spider-Man cover. So we did that reference, and then it was like, going forward, let's do a couple of those. So every issue is going to have at least
So
one.
let's talk a little bit about the reward side of this, because that's what Kickstarter is for. That's what a lot of people come to Kickstarter for.
Definitely.
It's something that's super interesting. So obviously there is a whole digital bundle catch-up, which is, you could think it just the digital issue of Digital 3 if you back the first 2. And you don't need, digital 1 and 2 and 3. You get the digital for 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
And so obviously that's a digital catch-up. There's also the physical catch-up with that. And so that's also cool, because obviously people come in and out of Kickstarters all the time. And so obviously as a fan of Kickstarters, and I come in and out of projects where things just slide underneath the radar. So what is that like to offer that tier? Because I've been on Kickstarters that they don't offer, tiers like that. And I understand a Kickstarter not offering a super limited variant for that, issue 1 and 2, because it might have sold out. But even just reprinting issue 1 and 2, it is important in a lot of ways. So how do you guys feel about that and even doing that? Because it is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really important to us to be able to offer the complete series. It's been a number of years since we did issue 2. It was our plan to put them out pretty quickly, and like things have just kind of changed, and we're navigating how to do this completely on our own versus like going through like an indie publisher. So we've kind of had to shift gears and change our business plan for it, and I think we're in a good place right now where we can crank out the next few issues pretty quickly, hopefully. That's the game plan. So but it is important to kind of be able to catch people up, because even if they read it years ago, they might not have it around anymore. There's a ton of new people coming to the project that weren't aware of it when we first launched. And we're doing local cons like the East Coast or the Northeast area, but we're not stretching too far out. So it's a way to get people across the country and really globally involved. So that's what's so awesome about Kickstarter, is it's got this huge international presence. We've got backers from all over the world, and we're hoping to grow that. So really important to be able to get them on board right away. I think if you read issue 3, you're going to enjoy it no matter what. It's got a lot of fun to it, but to get the full story and really get the full experience, it's important for us to make sure that you get issues 1 and 2 as well. We've also offered issue 1 for free. You can go to our website and just read it if you'd like. And then, like you mentioned, there's the digital bundle. You can get all 3 issues digitally. You can get them in print. We have the first print run of them still. We don't offer any of our variants through Kickstarters in the future. So the variants that you see for this campaign will not be available when we do launch issue 4 or issue 5. Those variants are only for this campaign, as the variant for issue 2 was only available for the issue 2 campaign. But the main covers are around. So a great time to pick those up while they're still available from that first print run. And speaking of variants, we have some awesome variants. Tim Radecki did another variant for us. So we've got 2 Tim Radecki covers. And then artist named Dave Swartz did a...
this is one of the variants.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
I'm not sure which is which, actually. So this is one of the variants.
That's Tim Radecki. That was the variant we used for the Kickstarter here. A little Hulk and Wolverine action there. And then artist Dave Swartz did another one for us. There you go. Which I love this. This is so awesome. That's really focusing on Mikey and his monster persona, which is what most of issue 3 is going to focus on.
And this is just the regular cover, I think.
That's going to be your traditional issue 3, yeah.
And this is the super expensive one, from my understanding.
Yeah, so an idea we had a while ago, we never really did for the other campaigns. We've kind of been holding it for this campaign, is to do, it's called that green flower. It's a nod to That Yellow Bastard from Sin City. Mike, the co-creator, co-writer, had this idea to do a black and white issue with green pops, kind of like That Yellow Bastard, where it's got these pops of yellow throughout it. So we've been playing with that, and it's a lot of fun. So it's something that's super unique. We're just doing just for this.
And so obviously that idea is not a new idea. I backed a project up in Canada with Ben Cook, and he highlighted the entire book in certain areas with purple, because it's sort of the main character's theme.
Oh, awesome.
So it's a complete black and white book. So the book in general is black and white, which is its own thing. Your book obviously is in color. I want to make that clear. And so when you have a black and white book, but then you're accenting certain things, I don't know if you've read Polar or seen the movie Polar on Netflix.
No.
So Polar, the movie is done almost neo-noir style.
Okay.
But the comic is done much like Sin City, where it's black and white and then it's highlighted with orange. And those books change the dynamic. And this is very similar to that, where it's the idea where, obviously everybody knows weed is green for the most part. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. And so obviously that's something that's very cool. And also it's fun for Kickstarter, where I've seen other things where people have done and replaced certain things with the pew pew sign and the pew pew sounds from Star Wars in their books, and they have an entire variant of that where they rewrite the entire thing. So obviously when you're doing a Kickstarter, and this is what I'm curious, is that having things that are different in your Kickstarter are very important, because and I'm going to say this, and it has to be said. So at a convention, if you're charging a certain amount of money for an indie book, it becomes excessive. But when you're backing on Kickstarter, the reason why people are willing to spend more is for stretch goals and also fun stuff that's going on that can only be found on the Kickstarter. And so it's very important to have things that can only be found on the Kickstarter and that can't be picked up at a con.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. And we're far from experts at this, but just from studying, you know, I think we've spent the last year or two just backing projects that we really love, and kind of watching what's working for other people. It's that exclusivity that you're talking about, that this is only available for this limited amount of time, for this limited amount of backers. Those kind of things can drive those. So basically, if you're thinking about it, we only have three comics to sell. So it's trying to just create variety. So that passionate person that's willing to spend more, that's interested and wants to collect things, has more to spend, more that catches their eye. So trying to create those things that are unique, that are going to be exclusive, that you're limiting the amount of, that makes it more valuable to them in a way, because not everybody's going to have that. There's always the idea that I have this and you don't, or 10 years from now, oh, I can't believe I got that 10 years ago. I know there's a lot of things that I've got in my collection that I'm super stoked about, that have blown up, become popular, and I love the fact that I got this way back when. Now it's blowing up. That's exciting. So kind of just playing on the collector side of it, because the comic industry is twofold in a sense. There's people that are readers, and there's people that are collectors, and a lot of us are in the middle that like kind of do both. But so to offer something for both crowds, I think is important.
It's a lot of Kickstarters built on the idea that, you know, it's collecting and reading and it's exclusivity, and it's also the idea that people want to see projects they want to enjoy, and they also want something though that is more off the beaten path.
Yeah.
And they want something that is more exclusive or has a 150 print run. And that it's because, you know, there's, God forbid, you know, Spider-Man 807 has legitimately 70,000 copies printed.
Yeah.
You know, it's the idea that when I back a project, I just backed a project about a week ago. It has some of the books only have 150 prints, meaning that once that 150 print is done, it's over.
Yeah.
And now, if you want that book, well, you know, and I'm in the process of figuring out an exclusive that's going to be a 150 to 200, and I'm not a Kickstarter guy, but I'm thinking about buying an exclusive. So once that is done, I mean, it's done, and so it's a very different.
And think about if that book becomes the next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? Which was, I'm sure, a small print run back in the '80s, and you know, a huge property now. And
I mean, I'm not so concerned about my books becoming Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There was somebody that put out a post, and I know exactly who it is, and he's not going to like me saying it. And I made a response video to that because this is my sector. I am on the complete opposite side of this. I'm into comic book investing, alt investing, and this is like my sector. And not to say that things can't become big, but it's the idea that nothing's going to replicate the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Hate to break it to everybody.
Yeah,
Hate
right.
to break it. It's
30 some years later, people are still talking about that.
But things can get very well onto Netflix very easily. And there's going to be a point where indie books get optioned. Whether they go places, whether we're talking about them in 30 years, I don't know. But things are going to get optioned. But just because something gets optioned doesn't mean it's going to be made into something or it's going to hit. But nonetheless, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the indie comic world. And I think it is important to offer things that are different. You know, not everybody does a black and white comic or has a black and white version and a color version of their book. And that's something that's also now becoming bigger. And I know people who do that as well. And it's very cool when that happens.
Yeah, everybody's got to think out the box and come up with something new, or something that's not as done as often. And then it might catch on, and then we got to move on to the next thing and see what else is out there. It's also like working with what you have. You don't want to spend so much. To redesign a book is costly, but to do something like this where we can just drop the colors and add the greens back in is a way for us to control the amount of money we're spending to make some on the project. Because ultimately we're just trying to fund the printing of this third issue by doing all these other limited things.
And that's the thing about Kickstarter that's becoming a common pitfall trap is you
Yeah,
have so many rewards that you go and fund your book and you don't break even because you're spending it all on your stretch goals. And it's a
definitely.
big issue in a lot of ways. And obviously it becomes super complicated in that regard. And obviously you have some other stuff that you're offering too. I think you're offering some sketch cover bundles
Yep.
like
Tim
that.
Radecki, our artist, is being very generous with his time. So we talked to him about that. So he's going to do some sketch covers for us. He's also going to sign book plates. So instead of signing covers, we're going to do book plates. So you can get book plates that are going to be signed by Tim as well as myself and Mike Dean, the co-creator. So the three of us will sign those book
Book
plates.
plates are much easier to send to other people as well.
Yeah, and you know what? As a collector, I've gotten a lot of comics signed, but I actually prefer to have the book plate signed, so it's not damaging the comic too. So it's the best of both worlds, I think. So that's how we're going to move going forward.
And then even going further into this, you also have concept to creation class, and I'm not exactly sure how that is. Either it's 1 hour or it's 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah,
And
we're doing 3 sessions with the pitch, and that comes from Mike and I jumping in and figuring it out as we go. And we'll say we're not experts at how to do it the right way, but we've learned how to do it the wrong way from experience so often that we've got a lot of tips that we can share. We've done panels before at Comic Cons where we've talked about like creating indie comics and just getting your project from like the imagination to like in your hands. There's a lot of great resources out there. We just wanted to be able to narrow it down for a backer. So if anybody's interested in that, we'll do 3 sessions with you and just get your project from your idea to in your hands. Hopefully, we'll get you the tools you need for that.
yeah, and then obviously there's a lot of cool stuff going on with this. And then also I am curious where you think all this stuff is going with conventions and what even the future of Kickstarter looks like. Because I know you guys are brand new to Kickstarter, but I am super curious where you think Kickstarter is going.
Yeah. First with the cons, we're planning our year out so far in advance. And 6 months ago, we had no idea where the world would be right now. And I feel like I'm happy to say that things have moved pretty quickly, which is great. But we made the executive decision then that we were going to focus on our writing and focus on this Kickstarter, and then hit the cons again in 2022. So we're not finishing the year as a lot of other indie creators are doing cons in the fall and cons right now. So we're going to hold off until spring or summer of 2022. It just makes sense with the book so close to being out. We'll be able to hit the con with all 3 issues. So we focused on Kickstarter, but Kickstarter has grown tremendously. We did our first Kickstarter in 2014. And I mean, the platform was huge then, but it's nowhere near what it is now. And it shifted our mindset. So at the time we were kickstarting, again, we were a little bit naive about the indie comics industry as a whole. We thought we'll kickstart to get to issue 2, and we'll use that to pitch to get on an indie comic book publisher, and we'll figure it out from there. To now looking at Kickstarter going, this is a viable option to create our books and get them out. Thinking about it as like a pre-order. So we've built a fan base that we have social media contacts to and a mailing list, and just being able to like really focus, micro focus on your specific niche audience that you've picked up and developed is tremendous. Where you're going to a con as a fishing expedition, and it's part of the industry, and we love doing it. But if you think about conversion rates of how many people are exposed to it versus people that buy it, marketing directly to our audience already is going to be far more successful, and it's working well for us now. So I think just in the few years since our first Kickstarter, which was for issue 2, to now, the platform has grown. I think there's a lot that creators are doing now to market that has advanced. And I think there's really, one of the really best things is just being in certain groups, Facebook groups and things like that, where we can share ideas and really grow as a community, which is really awesome. We didn't have that kind of community support before, and I've learned a lot over the last few years just following those kind of things, or on Reddit or things like that, and seeing what's working for other people, and them sharing, this is what's working for me, and this is what's working for us. That's really helped us as creators, and we hope to pass on that same kind of info for things that are working great for us.
Yeah, and then to even go further into this, because obviously I think it's pretty safe to say, and I'm curious how you feel about this, because obviously I've written, 2021 off for me going to conventions and presenting, and I'm viewing it as a down year. 2020 was a down year, and I just am, I'm viewing it saying, hey, what is going to happen? Because it seems to me that, New York Comic Con is happening, and obviously I'm on the East Coast, I'm in Connecticut. I think you're either in Philly or Jersey. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm in Philly.
And so the idea is that I'm just saying, hey, I'm just letting it see where all this goes, because while a lot of cons are pulling out the stops, I also think there's a lot of unknown factors in the convention world right now. I mean, there's a whole nother variant of COVID. Also, apparently, there's people who get COVID, but they're asymptomatic and it's not as bad. And there's a lot of stuff going on where people have gotten the shot and then have had COVID symptoms. And so I am very confused on all this, not to mention that I'm also curious how economically people are going to be at these conventions as well, where I'm not selling anything to anybody at a con right now. But, again, I don't know how penny tight people are going to be. And I've heard stories on both sides of this where people are like, people have money at cons, and I've heard people are very, very selective from people in the industry, and it's mixed. And so I'm curious how you feel about all of this going forward for I guess, the next, 5-6 months. And really, when's that going to sort of end? Because we're at the tail end of con season. A lot of conventions are happening now every weekend, and they're going to be going strong till about October. But where do you feel that's going? If you have any sense, because I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, and if I did, I would probably be bullshitting you on how accurate that is, right? Because I feel like none of us really know, even the people that say they've got a good sense of it. It's a difficult thing, and even looking at where we've been this last year and a half, there's with all the ups and downs, I didn't predict any of that, So hard to say. I'm definitely going to be following it all and seeing what's going on. Because to really jump in full force, we have to plan it. It's not going to be like a spur of the moment kind of thing for us. So to really understand if it's worth the investment of time and money that it's going to cost to get back into those things. That's a big thing. That's
the other thing too, is that it's table costs, it's time, and it's also the idea of even how is this going to run? Like that. That's my question right now. Also, from not even from an economic standpoint, but how is it going to run with people at these cons, and also like what is even the vibe of the convention going to be like? Because you're selling a book that, and I say this where it is being destigmatized, but it definitely hits a niche audience that has a certain vibe of fun to them, and that it's kind of like if everybody's sort of uptight in the entire con world a little bit, well, that's sort of what it's going to be. And also it's kind of like, I just don't know how it's all going to run. And that's my other question, is that like, it's just so complicated. There's so many questions.
That's a great point. Yeah, we're definitely our comic is a humorous book that plays to a fun crowd. You can see the person approaching your table from like 10 feet away, and as they're putting it together, they're reading, and you're like, wait a minute, I see the smoke, I see the name, they're putting it together. Yes, I don't know how that pitch would work if people are very serious. But also just like, I love New York Comic Con, but they always sell out those shows. It's jam packed. You're walking around like you're shoved into a crowd, walking through things like this. I'm getting anxiety thinking about being in a crowd of that size indoors. Even with vaccination rates going up, like there's too many variables, as you mentioned.
It's this idea also that New York Comic Con is sort of at the start of flu season, I want to say.
Yeah.
It's also this idea that there's variants coming out. I'm not trying to scare anybody, so I hope everybody takes this me not scaring you. But it's this idea that also it's kind of like, con crud is real. I don't know if you've ever.
That's what I was going to bring up. Yep.
And it's always been there. There's no question. It's always been there. It's just that I think COVID has proven that it's become very, real, and that, cons were never safe.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea that I don't want to be packed in with 70,000 to 75,000 people. I'm not ready to go back to that, and I don't think I'm ever going to want to go back to that. I don't want to go to a football game with 90,000 people either. And that's outside. Like, I prefer to go to a con that has 40,000 people. If I'm going to go to that, and that's still a lot of people. And so I don't know if I'm ever going to go to New York Comic Con. I lived in DC before this, so that really was, I was going to go up to New York from DC, but I was going to also con that has 40,000 people, and also the Javits Center is a freaking jam-packed convention.
They really jam everybody in there.
It is outdated, and it is not a good convention center.
Yeah.
So
right. We've all suffered from the con crud before. I feel like that happens every con, and every comic creator that I talk to always has the con crud that they talk about. So it's definitely a real thing. And put that with COVID, you can see how easily it spreads. But just like the recycled air, that many people in a small confined space, you're really on top of each other just about everywhere you go. Obviously, back then there was all the handshaking, and I feel like that kind of stuff is going to go out of fashion now, hopefully. But still a very real thing. Yeah.
I also think that cash is going to go out of fashion.
Yeah. So we all have to adapt to that, right?
Which is not good for me because I love paying in cash.
Yeah. I love accepting cash. It works out.
It's the idea that if you accept cash, well, it's immediately usable. You're not paying a process fee. You don't need to have a Square with Wi-Fi, which could be a big problem.
That's the biggest thing, right? That's what I was going to ask you. Like, do you use Square?
So I don't use. I've never sold at a con.
Okay.
So I've never had this problem because I am a complete online business.
Yeah.
I have never sold at a con. I sell on eBay, and I'm most likely going to open up my own website, which I'm going to take either PayPal or use a credit card processor like Square just through my website. I have no desire to sell at a convention. At some point I will most likely sell at a convention, and that's a great question. Is that, do I use Square? Do I use Chase Pay? But you need Wi-Fi for that, or you have to use your own LTE or your 5G. And 2 gigs of data is going to be pretty quickly used up.
Yeah.
3 days of that. And so that's a big issue in a lot of ways.
That's a great point. I didn't even think about that, is the return to cons and how do you adapt to a cashless system. Yeah.
And so a lot of
some research on that.
The pike here, and this is why I'm saying to myself, because the only thing I've ever done at a con is I used to present panels, and all I would ask is, hey guys, just check me out on social media, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Facebook, and people don't do it, which is crazy. And so now I'm just going to start asking for money instead, and pass around a hat, and we'll see what happens. And throw up my cash app and say, hey guys, just give me $5 right now, or you can follow me on Twitter. What would you rather do? That's the point here. But kidding aside, or I'll just say, hey guys, why don't you just give me your credit card and I'll take what I need.
Just post it up here for everybody to see.
Guys, I have a bunch of things that I need to buy on Amazon. Just everybody line up, give me your credit card for 5 minutes, and I'll return it at the end.
Post a wish list for everybody to see there.
But this is what I'm trying to figure out, is that that's kind of what I'm figuring out. And also my entire thing is there's a great digitalization pivot going on. Yeah. With all of this. And so why would I want to sell at a convention when I legitimately can go and put my book up on eBay, and especially if I'm buying an exclusive? And that's just the way I view it, is that, that's where I'm going with this. And also, no offense, but your book definitely goes beyond more just comics. I mean, there's a bunch of people who love weed, and they're going to be interested in this just because it fits that. And maybe people who like weed don't want to say we like weed. Yeah, right. So it's a discrete purchase. And that is a demographic we're trying to figure out. We've really focused on the as an indie book selling indie comics to indie comic fans, but a whole other niche out there that doesn't maybe necessarily normally read comics that might be interested because of the just like the buzz factor of it, and just having it to show their friends is definitely something that we're exploring and figuring out how do we market to a new audience to really try to get that cross promotion from both. And so obviously there's a lot of cool stuff going on with this. So I do want to let you have an opportunity to promote yourself. So where can people find you? Where can people find this project? Obviously, where can people support the project? I got the links up above. Awesome. And if you want to let people know that Kickstarter link is active, and you can back the Kickstarter. So, but going beyond that, I know there's some Facebook pages, probably some Twitter, some Instagram stuff as
Yep.
well.
Yeah, so yeah, the Kickstarter is going on through August 5th, so check it out. We've already reached our funding goal. We reached our goal in 24 hours, which is really cool. We're almost double our goal. We're only a couple $100 away from doubling our goal. We'll do that soon. We've got our first stretch goal lined up. Instead of doing it by dollar amount, we're doing it by backers. So we're just 2 backers away from our first stretch goal. It's going to be a digital comic bundle, just some really awesome indie comics that we're super fans of, and we've partnered with creators of those to get you guys more indie comics, just to help promote them and get you some really cool comics. We've got some more exclusives coming down the line that'll be stretch goals as well. That'll just be offered for this Kickstarter campaign. But as in terms of social media, at Superbud Comic for Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We have a website, superbudcomic.com. It's got information on our Kickstarter there as well. And you can just Google Superbud Comic, and you'll find us.
And obviously, I've been saying this over and over and over again. You have to support indie comics. What that means is you got to back Kickstarters, and you really got to back it. You got to share those Kickstarters. You got to go, comment on those Kickstarters. You got to comment on social media. You got to like things on Facebook, like Facebook pages. And I get it. Money's tight, guys. COVID has wrecked a lot of people. It still has wrecked a lot of people. And one of the things, though, is that if you're tight with money and you can't back the project, share the project, because it goes a long way when you share projects.
Yeah, thanks so much for saying that. That's huge, right? Like if you can't back it, share it. You never know who in your circle, your social media circle is interested, and it might come back to us tenfold. So that's huge. I really appreciate you saying that. Definitely share it around, get the word out, so we can kind of build buzz, not just on Superbud, but on all those awesome indie comics that are out there. Take a moment to scroll through the Kickstarter page. You'll see so many really great projects that are really original. The art's really awesome so really awesome projects out there.
And it goes a long way to share something. And as you said, you never know who's watching. There's been people where, people have shared things and I've shared things and people backed a bunch of Kickstarters because of it. And it goes a super long way. And also, I'm going to just throw my hat in there with what I'm doing, support a lot of people who also are the infrastructure behind it. There's plenty of people who are editors who work on books. There's people like me, obviously my podcast, Buy Me a Coffee goes a long way, guys. And it makes a huge difference. And so you have to support indie content. And the way you do that, first and foremost, beyond money, is you share it. Because sharing it is the key to everything, more so than money, because you don't know who's watching. And it only takes, one click of a button to share something. And it goes so far in so many directions. So I encourage everybody, first and foremost, share it. And if you like what you're seeing, obviously back the project, whether you're backing digital or physical, because I know that the physical rewards can go really high up on this project, but there's also some that are very reasonably priced. And so there's a tier for everybody on this. And if you're just interested in digital's the most cheapest thing you could back, and you could catch everything up and it's delivered right to your mailbox. So it's super, super cool on that front. So on that note, before I keep going and get us all in trouble here, I do want to give you the final word.
Oh, wow. I've never had the final word. Is it just one word? No, one, I'll say, Andrew, thanks for having me on. It's been awesome talking comics with you. Really cool show you got going on here. I can't wait to share it with everybody. Get all those Superbud fans out there tuned into what you're doing here. But yeah, if you're interested in weed and superpowers and seeing how those two things combine, come check us out. It's a lot of fun. We take the storytelling seriously, but we have a lot of fun along the way.
Well, I'm assuming, because my computer just chomped out, I'm assuming you just continued.
I did, yeah. Hopefully that turned out okay.
I caught the tail end of it. I want to make that crystal clear for about 30 seconds right there. I completely tuned out, so I'm not going to make you repeat yourself. But
I gave you a shout out. I said, thanks for having me on. It's an awesome show.
Well, I would totally miss that. But thank you for being on. I absolutely appreciate it. And as I've been saying, back the Kickstarter, everybody. It's super important to do that, first and foremost, and obviously share, that Kickstarter out, and share that you actually backed it, because that also helps tremendously.
Yeah, definitely.
Kickstarter makes it super easy to do that.
Yeah, and that'll help get the project to the top page and get more eyes on it. So that's huge.
And so on that note, I think that's a wrap.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for having me on, Andrew. This was really a lot of fun. I appreciate you having us on.
Well, thank you for being on.